To this now, the number of civil summonses issued for debt is going down. Stats SA data shows the total number of civil summonses issued for debt decreased by 14.5% in the 3 months ended February compared to the same time last year. Now, the largest negative contributors are civil summonses issued for money lent, services and promissory notes. The number of civil judgments recorded for debt also went down by 1.5% in the 3 months ended February. The largest negative contributors to the decrease were civil judgments relating to money lent, promissory notes and other debt. The value of civil judgments recorded for debt, however, increased by 11.3% during the same period compared to the corresponding time last year. The largest positive contributors to the increase were civil judgments relating to the services and other debts. Now, in February alone, close to 11,000 civil judgments for debt amounting to just over 300 million rands were recorded. All right, Benay Sager, chairperson of the National Debt Counsellors Association, joins us now for this. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Perhaps before we look at the decrease, just talk to us about just how indebted South African consumers are, and just given, of course, the economic climate that we are finding ourselves in at the moment.
Thank you for having me on the show. Always a pleasure. I think we all know that economically speaking, it's been a very difficult time for the South Africans. Particularly over the last several years, going back to 2020, but still continuing. Our growth rates, the impact of load shedding, as you mentioned in your previous headline, along with serious interest rate increases and inflation, I think they all hit the consumers very, very hard over the last few years. So what has happened is we can see some differences in terms of different income levels and different debt levels. But there's also been quite a bit of tightening of lending to consumers since already starting back from 2018, 2019, but continuing until now. So I think what you see with regards to civil judgments and summonses needs to be remembered in context of that. When lending also slows down, inevitably, the volume of the summonses and judgments taken up is going to slow down as well. But also, I think what happened is from a private lending perspective, a lot of the lenders, which are generally banks, but not always, have decided to not pursue the route of, courts as much as they used to. And in addition to that, starting from 2017, we have seen slowdown of lending to lower income groups. So I think all of this has contributed to the stats that you mentioned in terms of decrease in volume. But as you rightly pointed out, South Africans are still struggling with debt repayments. I think we routinely find that people need more than 60% of their take-home pay to repay debt. And what we've seen in some of this data, actually, that was released today by Stats SA, supports the point you made that the value of the judgments and summonses taken out has actually gone up, particularly against businesses. There's some seasonality and some differences, but I think it's a bit of a mixed message, I would say.
And just talking about that mixed message, particularly, I mean, you have explained the reasons behind this decrease, but perhaps talk to us about this. I mean, in February alone, we are hearing close to 11,000 civil judgments for debt amounting to just over 300 million rands were recorded. I mean, you did somehow paint the picture in terms of the reasons why, but when are we going to find a time where South Africans can actually reduce this debt significantly, because 300 million rands in 1 month alone is high?
It's a lot, but if you consider, what it was a few years ago, 11,000 used to be more than 30,000 per month. If you go back several years, I would say over 10 years or so. And I think the volume has decreased. The amounts have not necessarily decreased. And this is just a fraction of the debt. We just need to point out to all our viewers that, this is only a fraction of the debt that has gone to courts. And it's a mixture of debt. It's a mixture of money owed to, let's say, banks. It's a mixture of money owed to businesses that are non-banks. It's a mixture of money owed to, in some cases, the revenue authority or tax authorities. Sometimes it's levies from, and it's a range of things that are owed. So I think we need to consider that context. Your question is the right one. When will we have money? When will we have enough money to pay back all the money that we have borrowed, in a way? And it's a difficult one to answer. I think in our view, in our association's view, we need to make sure that there's enough jobs and enough growth in our economy to make sure everyone is adequately catered for. And that's only going to be, it's a long-term project from where we stand today. It's probably you're looking at 3 to 5 years to get the economy growing, to make sure that there's more jobs than the number of people entering the workforce every year who turn 18. It's a long-term prospect. So while the amount of 300 million, it sounds a lot, when you consider the big picture of South Africa with 62 million citizens, it's actually not bad. I'm not diminishing its importance, but I think what we need to focus on is to make sure that the right growth is in place to create jobs.
And just given, those problems that are significant, just talk to us about the balance from both those who are lending and those that are actually lending. I mean, borrowing rather. When you look at consumers as an example, there has to be some form of responsibility there in as far as, what they go out to in terms of spending. But the responsibility ought to also lie with those that are borrowing, and those are primarily banks, particularly when you look at that they are targeting also already indebted consumers.
I think you make an excellent point. We always say in the association, it takes two to tango. I think the responsibility, as you rightfully pointed out, falls on both sides. The right affordability assessments have to be made when lending. So, and we would also argue that, it's the minimum expense guidelines that were published in 2015 that used to guide, and to some extent does today, lending practices. Those are, given the inflation figures of the last several years, they are very, very inadequate and they're very out of date. Since 2015, it's been 9 years, and over that period, price of everything has doubled, if not tripled. So the costs of living have also substantially changed, and we would urge, those to be updated to help the lenders make the right assessments. On the side of borrowers, when consumers are borrowing, we always urge them to be truthful. It's important to be truthful about what you're earning, but also what you're spending your money on. We understand that sometimes, people try to sort of game the system by giving, incorrect numbers. But in the long term, if you borrow money that you will not be able to pay back, that at that point, it's actually going to hurt your own credit score, and it's going to cost you more to borrow in the future. And I think we all need to remember that. There's nothing wrong with borrowing money when you need it to use it for the right purpose. We all understand that. But if you are, you need to be truthful what you're declaring in terms of income, expenses, and all of the other stuff to make sure that you're not putting yourself in a difficult position. And just one more thing to leave our viewers with. Just because you qualify for something like a loan doesn't mean you can afford it. I think there's a difference between the two. So make sure you do your sums accurately. Make sure you cater for things like unexpected interest rate increases, and like we've had over the last several years, very serious inflation, particularly for necessities. Make sure you cater for those before you go out and borrow money.